Hey Throne and Liberty fans, this is my Tier 2 PvP build for Staff Wand. This is a hybrid damage dealer and healer. It's really built for skirmishing. Now, if you followed my videos in Tier 1, I ran a melee, evasion, and ranged endurance build. With Tier 2, there's a lot more gear possibilities, and so I have opted to build for melee evasion and ranged evasion. And the big reason why, aside from lessening the amount of damage I take from those two sources, which is 6 of the weapons in the game, the other reason is that by having high evasion, you actually can passively evade crowd control from those two weapons, and that's especially helpful against melee weapons. Now, as far as the build compares to other builds, like here are its pros and cons. So it's tanky AF. That's what people have said to me. You passively evade melee and ranged crowd control. You have an execute and curse explosion. It has really good mana drain in fireball barrage. You have good mana recovery with inner peace, and you have multiple sources of bind. 2 abilities that can be cast 3 times. On the downside, you are vulnerable to magic attacks. This build provides overall pretty mediocre damage, and there's a very narrow set of gear options, and you won't be able to build for any 2-piece armor bonuses. So the other build that I was considering for Tier 2, and I really had to make a choice one way or the other. Like in this game, you have to choose chocolate, strawberry, vanilla, rocky road, whatever. You can't just mix your ice creams because they're totally different. The other option I was looking at was a mitigation build with Feral Prophet, which provides defense to you and the group, and Eternal Warlord, which has a 2-piece which provides endurance to you and your group. But overall, I've been really happy with how this build has worked out. Part of what has made it a challenge is that while I play actively, I'm not as sweaty as a lot of the top-end PvP players. Like, for example, in this video, I have 44 combat power, right? But a lot of top-end players are probably now at 6,800. And I still have another 45 mastery levels to grind out each of my weapons, and I still need to trade up my earring, which only has one, just the first unlocked trait. That's it. It's funny, I was going to make this video about this build back in late April, but I was missing some of the gear was locked behind either field bosses, such as the Royal Praetor's Gauntlets, that's the handpiece, and 2 of the jewelry pieces, the necklace and the bracelet options, were both locked behind the Arc Boss Cordy. But thankfully those have become available or obtainable because of recent events. But when I was going to make the video in late April, I still hadn't fully geared up, so I couldn't say for sure that the build was going to work. I projected it was, but then there was the release of trait resonance, and that really that took time for me to catch up and get fully trait resonance. I'm in a very active PvP guild. I had people in my guild who had all of their gear slots, all 13 trait resonance on the first day that patch was released. It's taken me the better part of a month because I've just been really busy in real life, but I have finally caught up to a place where I feel like I can speak credibly about this and knowledgeably. And the other thing too is I've been playing a lot with different mastery node options, the unlockable nodes, and so what I'm going to share with you here is everything that I've learned. So this is footage from the Bercant event. What you try to tend to do with this build, open up with Touch of Despair. That can apply multiple stacks at once, and it can dot up multiple players. This is an AOE build, but I also have some single target mixed in with the Fireball Barrage with the mana drain, and that ability I just fired, which is Ice Spear Bombardment, which is a super reliable ranged bind because it's an 8-hitter. You just need one of the 8 to hit, and your target will be stuck in place for a few seconds. As far as range binds, or as far as binds go, I also have Frost Smokescreen, which can be used twice, and that with the Ebon Soulwind staff that I am using, that's from the secret dungeons, and you can craft it. A very, very good staff. It actually increases the damage from the specialization, the 3-point specialization, which I have taken for Frost Smokescreen. which adds more damage to people who are sitting in your frost smoke screen, the damage over time effect. So what you typically do, open up with Touch of Despair, spam your fire bombs, the 3 cast, then load up on Infernal Wave, and if you're fortunate and your target doesn't have high evasion or hasn't cleansed it, they will then be stuck, they'll have up to 10 stacks of burning on them. It might take you a few casts of Touch of Despair to get up to 2 or 3 stacks, but then when you do that, you have the ability to use Curse Explosion, and that will simply consume the remaining time that you've got on your dots and dump that as one backloaded burst. One really great thing is my guild gave me the Tevent wand, and the proc on that wand is amazing, and when legendaries are released, I think that's a fantastic proc, because every time you put Touch of Despair on a target, I think you get like a 15% chance to put the Tevent damage over time, which is a 30-second damage over time effect. It has no cooldown, so you can place it on multiple people. You can't refresh the dot while it is on a target. However, if they cleanse it, or it expires, or you consume it with Curse Explosion, your next Touch of Despair cast could put it right back on them again. If you want to follow this build but you don't have Tevent's Wand, you can still run a Curse Explosion build, or you can instead replace that with Judgment Lightning and trait the AoE damage effect. Either will work. I use Curse Explosion in Tier 1 even without the Tevent Wand and still found it to be a very, very useful tool. If you get someone dotted up, like the max stacking you would get with this build is the Tevent's proc, 3 stacks of Touch of Despair, and 10 stacks of Burning, and I've been able to hit people for about 11,500 with those fully stacked. Now in a lot of cases, either because of, like in this case here, I got this person fully stacked, I could drop, you know, a 10, 11k, depending on their mitigation. Curse Explosion. This is actually a mirror fight I'm fighting. I think this looks like, yeah, another Invocator, so another Staff Wand player who, like me, is annoyingly built for mana drain. You can also run a wand damage over time effect, which causes the target to lose mana whenever they're hit, whether it's by you or somebody else. I just take Fireball Barrage, that's enough, because you only have 12 ability slots, and so you have to kind of pick and choose what you're going to put on there. Now, you know, with Tier 2, the hardest thing about combat is, you know, daggers are prevalent. Probably 50% of players are using a dagger, and that provides an amazing evasion buff. And so, you know, players are running around with, you know, 3k evasion. They're super hard to hit. And so it takes time to land and stack stuff on them. But, you know, the advantage I have over dagger players, you've seen me kind of run over or outlast some of the dagger players, is, you know, I can heal, and I have multiple defensive options. So you can use Invisible Wall. That can heavy attack, and so the size of your shield will get doubled. You guys may already know this. I didn't learn this until Tier 2, but crit chance has a much lower, let's say, contribution towards healing. So your heals don't crit as much, but for heavy attacks, whether it's attacking an opponent or healing yourself or friendly, the heavy attack calculation is the same. So heavy attacks are fantastic for, you know, getting that double-sized Invisible Wall shield. Here I'm getting absolutely bombed. I pop my Guardian, I use the heals as soon as I can, and then Invisible Wall once it's off cooldown, and then Blessed Barrier. The great thing about Blessed Barrier is it gives you a huge amount of defense, which just improves your overall mitigation. And then, you know, during the day it also boosts your healing, and at night it'll boost your, I think it boosts your endurance. On top of all this, against melee and ranged, I have Victorious Energy, which buffs my hit and my evade. Now this right here is a good example of what you shouldn't do. I hadn't died in this Dominion event up to that point, but I went chasing damage, and not only did I do that, I didn't hit Invisible Wall before I engaged. Like if I know someone's looking at me, say I'll pop Invisible. I should have popped Invisible Wall early against this player. But, you know, I do it there, especially if you're facing a Greatsword player. They've got lots of CCs, or you're facing a Magic player because you're going to eat a lot of initial damage. You should just pop Invisible Wall preemptively. Now here I'm facing a Templar, so that's Sword and Shield, Wand, and you can see they can chunk my health with Curse Explosion, but then it takes a while for them to build it back up. Basically, this fight would end up in a draw. So they're, you know, obviously you need to be careful and pick your target selectively. Templars can be a pain to kill solo. There's even like a player on our server I've seen tank 8 to 10 people sustainably based on the way that they're built. And then if you're facing a seeker, so that's a longbow wand player who's really built for healing and survivability, you're not going to be able to kill them. You can eventually mana drain them, which is super annoying, and I've had people comment to me about the mana drain after we fought. But that's kind of like one of the nice things. You win with this build not by killing and bursting people quickly. You jab them to death, right? So you're not landing haymakers and knocking them out. That's what spear dagger players do, or greatsword, Ravager's a greatsword dagger, or like the spellblades, the staff dagger players. But I want to show you a couple clips against really good players. So this player, Inoki, this is, I think, spear dagger. This is the highest ranked killer on our server. Very good player, and it's always kind of fun to be on the same team as Inoki in Dominions because this guy absolutely steamrolls people. But what I can do against melees, I have a few tools at my disposal. I can use either Ice Spear Bombardment as a ranged route or Frost Smoke Screen to create separation. And then as defensive abilities, I've got Invisible Wall for the shield, Blessed Barrier for the extra defense, and it buffs your healing. And then, or at least at night, it buffs endurance. And then I've got Victorious Energy, which is relevant against and melee range because it boosts my evasion by 460. It still does help when you're fighting magic players because it boosts your hit by 460. It just doesn't help with the mitigation. I did some maths in a spreadsheet and kind of trying to figure out if I had to compare this to a triple evasion build, right? Like a triple endurance build, where the endurance is around 1500. I don't really have any meaningful endurance. I don't think I have any melee or ranged endurance. And so if a player has 2,000 crit chance and I were an endurance build with 1,500, their excess of crit is still going to be 500 over my endurance, which would translate to a 500 divided by 500 plus 1,000, which is a 33% chance for me to be crit as endurance build. Now, in this build, since I have no endurance, when I get crit by magic, for example, or melee, assuming they've got 2,000 crit and I've got 0 endurance, that's an excess of 2,000, and so their chance to crit is going to be 2,000 divided by 2,000 plus 1,000, which is 67%, 2/3 of the time, right? So it's important to note, like with endurance, unless you're pushing super high values, you're still going to get crit. You're just going to get crit, like in this hypothetical example, literally half as much as I will. But in looking at doing some basic maths, in this build I have about 2,800 melee evasion, 2,700 ranged evasion, and if you assume, and that's just base, that's without any buffs, right? This guy, by the way, is just commenting mana burn, right? Because this is the number, I think, 16 killer on our server, running spear greatsword, so a lot of control, a lot of damage. He's got the Queen Bells spear. But if you assume that the average, for example, ranged player has 2,100 hit, since I have 2,700 base ranged evasion, that's a 600 gap of evasion, which translates to a 38% chance to passively evade attacks. And compared to an endurance build, I'll take 26% less damage. And then if I say I've got 2,800 melee evasion, the average person melee attacker has got 2,300 melee evasion, and I know some melee evasion players can go way higher, up to 3k. But that's going to give me a 500 gap of evasion over their hit, which translates to a 33 passive chance to evade attacks, including CCs. And that means I would take 21% less damage compared to someone who's got 1,500 melee endurance. I'm not saying that this is better than endurance. I'm just saying it's different because obviously I can't, with the gear options available, because I don't have a dagger, I can't go triple endurance, right? And so what it means is against magic, compared to a 1,500 endurance build, I'm going to take about 19% more damage on average. I could definitely feel it. All right, so you're getting a look at my gear here. There really isn't a lot of optionality. You have two choices among the bracers. I chose the bracers with hit, and then I actually swapped out the long time ring, the Sinking Sun Signet, with a Solitaire Purity because I needed to get hit. I've tried this build at 1,300 hit, 14, 15, 16, and now 1,700 hit with food, and it makes a huge difference. And thankfully, the earrings gave me another 100 hits, so sitting at, I think, 17 with food buffs. As far as the mastery, I take Power Surge for the damage. Mana Shield is great, by the way. That gives you about 350 defense, which mitigates everything. And then you're there, you can see I take one of the intensity nodes, which lowers my range endurance but gives me 2 wisdom. And then I take Abyssal Burst here for the mini curse explosion that doesn't consume the dots. And then Blessed Haste is terrific for getting those heals off cooldown to keep you alive. And then this is one of the best intensity nodes. Intensity nodes always have a con, but in this case the sleep chance penalty is irrelevant because I don't take sleep. But I get a fat amount of healing, 7.2%, plus 2 wisdom to get to those breakpoints. So I'm shooting for 70 strength, 60 wisdom, 60 perception, 30 dexterity, dexterity being the least critical. Critical chance doesn't factor as much in this build because dots have a very, very tight damage range, so crit doesn't really matter. Dots can heavy attack, but that's per cast, and the next time you cast, you might override it. As far as artifacts go, the most obvious is the 2-piece Wildlands Protector that gives you 100 evasion, and this particular talisman is stacked with evasion, heavy attack evasion, and more heavy attack evasion. I think this they've ranged. So it's awesome. And then I use Abyssal Beast. The 2-piece for Abyssal Beast gives 100 more hit, and then this particular piece is loaded with 100 hit itself, which is really important. This build is low hit, and you need to get it up there in order to have a chance to land. The third 2-piece bonus, you really have your choice between Forsaken Zealot, which is 150 defense, or Ancestral Armor for 1500 health. In this case, I chose 2-piece Harbinger, Chaos Harbinger, because that bottom right talisman I have not been able to replace. It is loaded with evasion and heavy attack evasion, so it's been super, super useful. This has been a really, really good build. I think in this current iteration that I've refined and optimized, I'm getting recently about a 2.5 to 1 kill to death ratio, which is good performance. Okay, well, I've had a great time showing this video to you and talking about the build and especially playing it, so let me know if you've got any questions or feedback and I'll try to answer them. Take care.